About History series, Yu Yonghe's sulfur mining trip to Taiwan.
All right, let's be honest, we've all seen modern extreme survival shows, but today we're throwing it way back to the late 17th century to follow a real-life, absolutely epic road trip. And trust me, the untamed world we're about to dive into makes surviving in the wild today look like a total walk in the park. You know, when we think about taking a trip today, our minds immediately go to, well, relaxing beaches, maybe a leisurely flight, checking into a luxury hotel. But this 1697 expedition, yeah, it completely shatters that idea of a getaway. We are talking jarring wooden ox carts, venomous snakes, totally unpredictable typhoons, and this terrifying invisible threat they called miasma. This was definitely not a vacation. It was a brutal, grueling test of human endurance.
So, let's get right into our first chapter, Massive Explosion and the Madman's Volunteer, taking a look at the 1696 Fuzhou disaster.
Picture this. It's the winter of 1696, and a massive fire breaks out in a magazine in Fuzhou, China. The devastation was just absolute. Over 500,000 caddies, which is literally hundreds of thousands of pounds of incredibly valuable gunpowder, just went up in smoke. Poof. The official in charge, a guy named Wang Chengqian, was facing total ruin. His only way out? His only viable way to replace the massive amount of sulfur needed for that gunpowder was to fund an expedition to go mine it across the sea, deep in the absolute wilds of Taiwan. Now, while all the top officials are understandably panicking over this crisis, this really quirky staff member from Hangzhou named Yu Yonghe actually steps up. Yu didn't see a terrifying disaster. No. He saw the ultimate state-funded excuse for an extreme adventure. He declared, "I love traveling afar, not avoiding dangers," and eagerly volunteered to head into the Taiwanese wilderness to mine this sulfur himself. I mean, this was basically the historical equivalent of volunteering for a one-way mission into the total unknown.
Moving right along to our next phase, Blackwater and ox carts. Let's talk about this incredibly treacherous commute.
So before he could even begin his big overland trek, Yu had to cross the Taiwan Strait. Back then, this stretch of ocean was historically dreaded as the Blackwater Ditch, and it definitely earned that ominous name because of its fierce currents, terrifying typhoons, and just countless deadly shipwrecks. Honestly, surviving that crossing was a miracle in itself, but Yu actually made it, landing safely in Tainan to kick off his grueling overland journey.
And once he hit land, there was absolutely zero time to rest. The pacing here is just wild. He departs Fujian in late January 1697 and arrives in Tainan by late February. Then he spends 2 solid months frantically gathering supplies, tools, 55 men, and a whole fleet of ox carts. Even with his friends giving him these dire warnings about the deadly frontier up ahead, he pushed north at a relentless pace starting April 7th and miraculously reached Danshui just 20 days later.
All right, let's step into the wild with our next section, exploring 17th century wild Taiwan, a truly unforgiving frontier. Just try to imagine the sheer physical exhaustion of this trek for a second. You've got a 55-man crew traveling mostly on foot, walking alongside these painfully slow, jarring wooden ox carts that are just shaking them right down to the bone. They are constantly battling the elements, dodging venomous snakes, and physically wading through wild, raging rivers. But along the way, they were also passing through diverse indigenous villages of the Pingpu and Gaoshan peoples, getting a first-hand look at a vibrant frontier that was largely untouched by outside development. Now, as they pushed further north, the environment shifted drastically. Step 1, they leave the relative safety of Tainan. Step 2, they move through established southern villages. But the real test? That began at Step 3, crossing the turbulent Dajia River. Because that crossing meant leaving civilization completely behind and entering Step 4, the completely unpopulated, untamed wilderness of the Danshu Basin. They were stepping deeper and deeper into the total unknown.
This brings us to a fascinating and dark part of the journey, trials in the miasma lands, focusing on that crucial Dajia River divide.
You see, the Dajia River wasn't just some physical obstacle requiring them to wade through rushing water. No, it was a major psychological point of no return. Once they crossed that geographical boundary, the landscape radically altered, and it seemed like human presence just completely vanished into the wilderness. All those comforting sounds of village life were entirely replaced by an incredibly isolating silence.
And the isolation they felt? It was profound. Yu Yonghe recorded these chilling observations in his journal, talking about passing through eerie villages full of empty houses, basically declaring it not a place suitable for humans. I mean, just getting a simple scoop of safe drinking water was impossible. Spotting another human being became a cause for massive celebration. They truly felt like they had walked right off the edge of the map.
So let's contrast this for a second. Down in the south, around Tainan, you had some agricultural development and active, vibrant indigenous communities. But the further north they marched towards Beitou to mine that sulfur, the more alien and dangerous everything became. Those vibrant fields were suddenly replaced by dense, impenetrable forests and suffocatingly silent, empty settlements that offered absolutely zero shelter from the harsh elements.
But listen to this. The biggest threat in that northern landscape wasn't actually the rough terrain or the snakes. It was this thing called miasma. Historically, people believed this was a toxic, disease-causing vapor that just kind of seeped out of the deep forests. It was an invisible killer. Now, today we understand these were likely vector-borne diseases, things like malaria. But to Yu's exhausted, terrified crew, the very air they were breathing in those sulfur valleys literally felt cursed.
Finally, let's look at the incredible outcome of all this in our last section. Epic travelogue, Fertile Paradise, exploring the lasting legacy of the Bihai Jiyou.
Out of this grueling, horrific survival test came an absolute literary masterpiece. Despite the horrors, the rampant diseases, and the sheer mind-numbing exhaustion, Yu Yonghe meticulously documented everything. He created the Bihai Jiyou, which translates to the travelogue of mining sulfur, and it stands today as this pioneering, completely unprecedented historical record, really serving as a cornerstone of early travel literature.
And the amazing thing is, he didn't just jot down a depressing list of his miseries. Yu created incredibly detailed geological records of those sulfur springs. He provided vital first-hand ethnographic notes on indigenous customs. He even wrote localized poetry, these beautiful bamboo branch songs, to capture the spirit of the local life. And, perhaps most impressively, he offered really forward-thinking, strategic policy ideas for governing the island. He turned a nightmare trip into an invaluable historical asset.
But here is the real kicker. While his men, and honestly most outsiders at the time, only saw this terrifying, disease-ridden frontier, Yu Yonghe possessed incredible visionary optimism. Looking way past the immediate danger, he wrote that, if developed, Taiwan will certainly be a beautiful and fertile paradise. He saw the immense potential of the land underneath all those hardships. He pictured a brilliant future that literally no one else could see.
So, Yu Yonghe saw a fertile paradise hidden beneath a deadly frontier over 3 centuries ago. It really makes you wonder, right? What untamed frontiers still remain for us to explore today? Are they out in space, in the deep ocean, or maybe in the world of technology? And more importantly, what will our own modern travelogue say about our courage, our endurance, and our vision 300 years from now? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer and exploring this fascinating historical journey.